Until I woke up in the hospital with my kidneys failing, I genuinely believed my mother-in-law's homemade soup was made with love. I know that sounds naive now. Looking back, I can see all the signs I missed. But grief has a way of clouding your judgment, of making you vulnerable to kindness that isn't really kindness at all. When you're drowning in loss, you'll grab onto any hand that reaches out to you, even if that hand is slowly pushing you under. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm here to tell you about the 6 months I spent being poisoned by the woman I trusted to help me raise my son. It started the day after we buried my husband, David. I remember standing in my kitchen, staring at the casserole dishes covering every surface. The house was finally quiet after 3 days of visitors and condolences. My 10-year-old son, Michael, had cried himself to sleep upstairs. I was alone with my grief and a refrigerator full of food I couldn't bring myself to eat. That's when Linda, David's mother, knocked on my door. "Sarah, honey," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like lavender and vanilla. "You can't stay in this big house all alone. It's too much for you right now. Why don't you and Michael come stay with me for a while?" I should have said no. David and I had worked so hard to buy that house. It was our dream home, the place where we'd planned to grow old together. But the mortgage payments loomed over me like a dark cloud, and my teacher's salary would barely cover it without David's income from the auto plant. "Just until you get back on your feet," Linda insisted. "I have plenty of room, and Michael loves his grandmother. It'll be good for both of you." Michael did love his grandmother. She'd always been the fun grandma, the one who snuck him extra cookies and let him stay up late when he spent the night. How could I say no? So 2 weeks after David's funeral, Michael and I moved into Linda's 2-story colonial on Maple Street. She gave us the entire second floor, David's old bedroom for Michael, and the guest room for me. She refused to take any rent money. "Your family," she said firmly. "David would want me to take care of you." At first, it felt like a blessing. Linda cooked dinner every night. She helped Michael with his homework while I graded papers. She did our laundry without being asked. She seemed genuinely happy to have us there, and I was grateful for the help during those dark early months of widowhood. The soup started in February, about 6 months after David died. I'd caught a nasty cold, one of those winter bugs that sweeps through middle schools like wildfire. I came home from work exhausted, my throat raw, my head pounding. Linda met me at the door with a steaming bowl of chicken soup. "I made this from scratch," she said proudly. "My special recipe with extra herbs. It'll fix you right up." The soup was delicious, rich and savory with a slight bitterness that I assumed was from the herbs. I ate the entire bowl and thanked her profusely. Linda beamed. "I'll make you some every day until you're better," she promised. And she did. Every single day, Linda brought me a bowl of her special soup. After a week, my cold symptoms faded, but new ones appeared. Headaches, nausea, a constant feeling of exhaustion that I couldn't shake. I assumed it was just the grief catching up with me, the stress of single parenthood, the endless cycle of work and worry. "You need to keep eating the soup," Linda insisted, when I mentioned I still wasn't feeling well. "You're run down. Your body needs nutrients." So I kept eating the soup, and I kept getting worse. By March, I could barely get out of bed on weekends. The headaches became migraines. I developed stomach pains so severe that I sometimes doubled over at my desk between classes. My colleague, Patricia, noticed I'd lost weight. "Sarah, you look terrible," she said bluntly one day in the teacher's lounge. "Have you seen a doctor?" I had, twice. Both times, the doctor ran blood tests and found nothing conclusive. "Possibly stress," they said. "Grief can manifest physically. Maybe I should see a therapist." The whole time Linda was there, concerned and caring, bringing me soup, insisting I eat to keep my strength up. Michael noticed before I did. One evening in mid-March, I was lying on the couch, too nauseous to eat dinner with them. I heard Michael's voice from the kitchen, quiet but tense. "Grandma, why does Mom only get sick after she eats your soup?" "Don't be silly, sweetheart," Linda replied smoothly. "Your mother is sick because she's sad about your daddy. The soup is helping her get better. But she gets worse after the soup, not better." "Michael, that's enough. Eat your dinner." I should have paid attention to that conversation, but I was too tired, too foggy-headed to process what my son was trying to tell me. I fell asleep on the couch, and didn't wake up until morning. The next day was a Saturday. I woke up feeling slightly better than usual, probably because I'd skipped the soup the night before. Michael asked if we could go to the library together, just the two of us. It was the first time in weeks I'd felt well enough to leave the house for something other than work. We spent 2 hours at the library. Michael picked out books about science and space, his favorite subjects. As we were leaving, he grabbed my hand. "Mom, do you feel better today?" "A little bit, honey." "Why?" "You didn't have Grandma's soup yesterday." "Michael, we've talked about this. Grandma is trying to help." "But Mom..." "Enough. I know you miss your dad, but Grandma has been so good to us. I don't want to hear you say unkind things about her." He went quiet, but I saw something in his eyes, something that looked like determination. That night, Linda made soup again. I ate it to avoid hurting her feelings, ignoring Michael's worried looks across the table. Within an hour, I was back on the couch, fighting waves of nausea. What I didn't know was that Michael had made a decision. The next Monday, Michael told Linda he wasn't feeling well and needed to stay home from school. She called me at work, concerned, asking if she should take him to the doctor. I told her it was probably just a stomach bug. Let him rest. But Michael wasn't sick. He was on a mission. Years later, Michael told me exactly what happened that day. He waited until Linda went to the garden to tend her roses, something she did every morning around 10. Then he crept downstairs to the kitchen and hid in the pantry, leaving the door open just a crack. He had my old iPhone, the one I'd given him to play games on. He'd figured out how to use the video camera. He waited. At 11 o'clock, Linda came inside. Michael watched through the crack as she pulled out her big soup pot and began her usual routine. But then she did something different. She reached into the back of the spice cabinet and pulled out a small, unmarked container. She looked around the kitchen, as if checking to make sure she was alone, then carefully measured out a small amount of white powder and stirred it into the soup. Michael filmed the entire thing, his hands shaking so badly the video was nearly unwatchable. But it was clear enough. He stayed hidden in the pantry until Linda left the kitchen, then crept back upstairs. He wanted to call me immediately, to show me the video, to make me believe him. But he was scared I wouldn't, that I'd think he'd faked it somehow or misunderstood what he'd seen. So he waited until I got home from work. I found him sitting on my bed, the phone clutched in his hands, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, you have to watch this. Please. I'm not making it up. I'm not being mean to Grandma. You have to believe me." The fear in his voice made me sit down. I took the phone and watched the video. I watched it 3 times. My hands started shaking. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. There had to be another explanation. Maybe it was just a new spice, something bitter that I was tasting in the soup. Maybe Michael had misunderstood what he saw. "Mom, you can't eat dinner tonight," Michael said urgently. "Please, I think she's poisoning you." "Michael, that's a serious accusation." "I know, that's why I took the video." "Mom, please, you're getting sicker and sicker. What if..." His voice broke. "What if I lose you too?" I looked at my son's terrified face, at the video on the phone, at my own reflection in the mirror across the room. I looked terrible, gaunt, gray, sick. "Okay," I said quietly. "I won't eat the soup tonight. We'll figure this out." Dinner that evening was torture. Linda had made a beautiful pot roast along with her special soup. She ladled a bowl for me, her smile warm and maternal. "Eat up, Sarah. You need your strength." "Actually, Linda, I'm not very hungry tonight. I think I'll just have some of the pot roast." Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "The soup is the best part. I made it especially for you." "I appreciate it, but my stomach's been bothering me. Maybe tomorrow." "Sarah, you've been sick for months. The soup has medicinal herbs. You need to eat it." There was an edge to her voice now, something I'd never heard before. Across the table, Michael had gone very still. I said no, thank you. The silence that followed was suffocating. Linda's face went through several expressions. Surprise, anger, something that looked almost like fear. Then she smoothed it all away and smiled again. "Of course, dear. Whatever you think is best." That night, I lay awake in bed, my mind racing. I kept thinking about the video, about Linda's reaction when I refused the soup, about how sick I'd been for months. About David's death. David had died in a car accident. Single vehicle crash on a rainy night, his car sliding off a country road into a ditch. The autopsy showed he'd had a heart attack at the wheel, sudden and massive. He was only 40 years old, healthy, no history of heart problems. At the time, I just accepted it as tragic bad luck. But now, lying in the dark, I couldn't stop wondering. The next morning, I called in sick to work and took the video to the police. The detective who watched it was a woman named Maria Santos, mid-40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Mrs. Mitchell, this is concerning, but it's not enough for an arrest warrant on its own. We need to know what's in that container. Do you have any idea where she keeps it? No, I've never seen it before. Is there any chance you can get a sample of the soup? We could test it. She makes fresh soup every day. I don't think there are any leftovers. Detective Santos thought for a moment. Okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to go back home and act normal. Tonight, you're going to eat the soup, but not all of it. Find a way to save some without her noticing. Can you do that? The thought of deliberately eating something that might be poisoned made my stomach turn, but I nodded. In the meantime, I want you to see a doctor today. Tell them you suspect poisoning and ask for a comprehensive toxicology screen. Can your son stay with someone else tonight? My friend Patricia can take him. Good, do that. We don't know how she might react if she realizes you're onto her. I spent the afternoon at the hospital. The emergency room doctor listened to my story with growing concern and ordered every test he could think of. Then I dropped Michael off at Patricia's house, telling Linda he had a school project to work on at his friend's house. Dinner that night was just the two of us. Linda had made her special soup, of course. I forced myself to eat it, taking small spoonfuls while making conversation about my day at school. Every bite felt like swallowing poison, which it probably was. I excused myself halfway through to use the bathroom and poured half the remaining soup into a small container I'd hidden in my pocket. Are you feeling all right? Linda asked when I returned. You look pale. Just tired. I think I'll turn in early. I made it to my bedroom and texted Detective Santos that I had the sample. She said she'd send an officer to pick it up within the hour. Then I sat on my bed and waited to see if I'd made a terrible mistake. The nausea hit around 9 p.m., worse than it had ever been. I barely made it to the bathroom before I started vomiting. My head felt like it was splitting open. I collapsed on the cool tile floor, too weak to move. That's when I heard Linda's footsteps on the stairs. Sarah, are you all right up there? I couldn't answer. I couldn't move. Through the bathroom door, I heard her enter my bedroom. Sarah? Her voice was closer now. I forced my eyes open and saw her standing in the bathroom doorway, looking down at me. For just a second, her mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. Oh dear, she said softly. You really don't look well at all. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a moan. Maybe I should call an ambulance, she said. But she didn't move. She just stood there, watching me, waiting. Later, Detective Santos told me that if I'd been alone, Linda probably would have let me die right there on the bathroom floor. Heart failure due to acute illness, the death certificate would say. So tragic. Losing both her son and daughter-in-law within a year. But I wasn't alone. The doorbell rang. Linda's head snapped toward the sound. Who could that be at this hour? She left me on the bathroom floor and went downstairs. I heard voices, official-sounding voices, and then footsteps, lots of them, coming up the stairs. Detective Santos appeared in the bathroom doorway. Mrs. Mitchell, we're getting you to a hospital. The soup sample you gave us tested positive for arsenic, high levels. The next few hours were a blur of ambulances, emergency rooms, stomach pumping, activated charcoal, IV fluids. The doctors told me later that if I'd eaten the whole bowl, if I'd kept eating the soup every day for much longer, my kidneys would have failed completely. As it was, I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Michael visited me every day, holding my hand, crying sometimes, telling me he was sorry he didn't figure it out sooner. You saved my life, I told him. You're the bravest person I know. Linda was arrested that night. The police got a warrant and searched her house. They found the arsenic hidden in her bedroom closet. They also found David's life insurance policy, the one I'd forgotten about in my grief. The one that paid out $500,000 to me as the beneficiary. Except it didn't. Not anymore. The police found documents showing that Linda had forged my signature, transferring the beneficiary designation to herself. She'd been planning this for months, maybe since before David died. That's when Detective Santos shared the results of David's exhumation. "Sarah, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your husband didn't die of a heart attack. His tissue samples show high levels of arsenic. We believe he was being poisoned too." The world tilted. Everything I thought I knew about David's death was a lie. "She killed him," I whispered. "She killed her own son. For the insurance money in the house," Detective Santos confirmed. "When you moved in with her, she saw an opportunity to finish what she started and get rid of you too. She probably thought people would assume you died of grief." Linda's trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. The video Michael had taken, the arsenic in the soup, the forged insurance documents, David's exhumation results, my medical records showing progressive arsenic poisoning. The prosecutor was a young woman named Jennifer Wu, and she was relentless. "This defendant," she said in her closing argument, "poisoned her own son to death." Then, when his widow and young child moved in with her, she saw them not as family to protect, but as obstacles to wealth. She spent 6 months slowly killing Sarah Mitchell, feeding her poison under the guise of loving care. If not for the sharp eyes and brave heart of a 10-year-old boy, she would have succeeded. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder of David Mitchell, attempted murder of Sarah Mitchell, insurance fraud, forgery. Linda showed no emotion when the verdict was read. She didn't look at me, didn't look at Michael. She just stared straight ahead, as cold and calculating as she'd been that night in my bathroom doorway. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That was 22 years ago. I'm 60 years old now, and I'm telling you this story because I've spent 2 decades thinking about trust, about family, about the masks people wear. I've spent 2 decades being grateful that my son loved me enough to break the rules, to spy on his grandmother, to trust his instincts even when I doubted him. Michael is 32 now. He's a detective himself, following in the footsteps of Maria Santos, who became a mentor to him after Linda's arrest. He says he became a cop because he learned young that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you are the ones who hurt you most, and somebody needs to stand up for the victims. I went back to teaching after I recovered, but I left Linda's house and moved into a small apartment with Michael. Eventually, I used David's real insurance money to buy us a modest home. Not the dream house we'd lost, but something better. A place built on truth instead of lies, on survival instead of grief. I've learned 3 lessons from those 6 months of poison, lessons I want to share with you. First, listen to your children. Their instincts are often sharper than ours because they haven't learned to doubt themselves yet. Michael knew something was wrong long before I was willing to see it. If I'd listened to him earlier, I might have avoided weeks of suffering. Your children see things you can't see, especially when grief or trauma has clouded your vision. Second, trust takes time, even with family. Especially with family, sometimes. Linda was David's mother. She'd been in my life for 15 years. I thought I knew her, but grief made me vulnerable, and she took advantage of that vulnerability. It's okay to protect yourself, even from the people who are supposed to love you. It's okay to question kindness that feels too good to be true. It's okay to maintain boundaries, even when someone is offering to help. Third, the most important lesson of all, justice isn't the same as revenge, and healing isn't the same as forgetting. I won't lie to you. There were times in the years after Linda's arrest when I was consumed with anger. I'd imagine confronting her, screaming at her, asking her how she could do this to her own son, to her grandson's mother. The rage felt like it would eat me alive. But eventually, I realized that holding on to that rage was just another kind of poison. Linda had already taken so much from me. My husband, my health, 6 months of my life, my ability to trust easily. I wasn't going to let her take my future too. So I chose to focus on the life I'd been given back instead of the one that was stolen. I chose to be grateful for Michael's courage instead of bitter about Linda's betrayal. I chose to live well, and living well, I've learned, is the best response to someone who tried to kill you. Michael and I visit David's grave together every year on his birthday. We don't talk about how he died anymore. We talk about how he lived, about the good father he was, about the moments we want to remember. We've made peace with the fact that we'll never fully understand how Linda could do what she did, and we've stopped trying. Some questions don't have answers that will satisfy you. Michael's getting married next year. His fiancée knows the whole story. Knows about the grandmother who went to prison for murder. Knows about the 10-year-old boy who saved his mother's life with a hidden camera and a lot of courage. She loves him anyway, maybe even more because of it. I'll walk him down the aisle, and I'll cry happy tears, and I'll be grateful for every single moment I get to experience because my son refused to let me die. If you're reading this and something feels wrong in your life, if someone's kindness feels off, if your children are trying to tell you something you don't want to hear, I'm begging you, pay attention. Trust your instincts. Ask questions. Protect yourself. The people who hurt us most are often the ones we trust most. That's a terrible truth to accept, but accepting it might save your life. And if you're a child reading this, if you see something wrong happening to someone you love, if adults aren't listening to you, keep trying. Find someone who will listen. Document what you see. Be brave. Even when it's terrifying. Michael saved my life because he loved me enough to disobey me, to go against everything he'd been taught about respecting his elders, to trust his own judgment even when I dismissed his concerns. He was 10 years old, and he had more courage in his little finger than most adults have in their whole bodies. I asked him once, years later, what made him hide in the pantry that day, what made him so sure he needed to take that video. He said, "Mom, you always told me that if something seems wrong, it probably is. You taught me to trust my gut. That day, my gut told me that if I didn't do something, I was going to lose you too. I couldn't let that happen." I taught him to trust his instincts, and those instincts saved my life. So, I'll end this story the way I began it. Until I